All right, today is December 4th, 2023, and this is the 24th episode of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will go over a whole bunch of things between the college football playoff, a couple of the bowl games that the Big Ten teams are in. We'll go into those deeper in a later episode, but we'll at least mention them today, and then we'll talk about the weekend that happened in college basketball. Joe, we are going to start at football as usual, and we have a lot of things to get to today. And this is one of the ones that probably doesn't need to be talked about as much. That's the Big Ten championship game itself. Michigan takes care of Iowa at Lucas Oil Stadium. They don't give up a point, and they are going to the college football playoff. You were there. Anything to add from that one?
No, Sean, I actually think a lot of the viewers of this game were pretty disappointed, and I can't say I blame them. But then again, when Iowa is in a football game, for all our national viewers, they now know what to expect. I don't think Michigan wanted to do anything special in this game. In fact, that would probably be the only chance they would have to give Iowa the opportunity to make it competitive. I know I just said chance in a bunch of different ways there, but no, Sean. Michigan's offense did not play well. Colston Loveland, a few drop passes. JJ looked pretty uncomfortable. Pretty safe to say he was not 100% on Saturday. But there's currently 28 days until the college football playoff where Michigan plays Alabama. Um, I, I do not think they even brought their C game to play Iowa. They pretty much ran their base offense. They ran a few plays. They had one kind of trick play to Cornelius Johnson on a jet sweep. That was really it. So, this is luckily the last Big Ten title game. The margins of victory since 2017 have been a flat-out joke. There's no other way to say it, Sean. So, third straight Big Ten title for Michigan. Jim Harbaugh, Tony Petitti. I was on the field post-game, so I will tell you, Petitti in the corridor looked very nervous coming out. He kind of didn't make eye contact with anyone in that corridor since it was all Michigan fans who were about to rush the field, who had field passes. So, I will give him this. He shook Jim's hand. A lot of people didn't give him credit for that. But beyond that, Sean, this is about the college football playoff now. And, should we get into that now?
Yeah, it's just the Big Ten West is no longer. And I think that's a good thing for a lot of their, we'll go into it in a future episode, but some Big Ten teams are not going to see other teams for 3 years now with the with no divisions now and a couple of protected games, but there's going to be 18 teams in this conference next year, so it will be completely different. The 14-team Big Ten, which we've seen for probably about a decade now, is over, at least on the football side. Joe, college football playoff, Michigan number 1 overall seed, not a shock. This is a Big Ten podcast, but we are going to talk about the controversy in the room. Texas and Alabama get in over an undefeated Power 5 champion in Florida State. I certainly understand the arguments for it, but at the end of the day, you can't do better than winning every single game. And just want to know your thoughts on it here, as Alabama, a team that really turned it up late, but was a mid-team at best at the beginning of the year.
So I am with you. I totally understand the argument. I think 80% of people would argue that Alabama today would beat Florida State on a neutral field, probably 9 or even 10 times out of 10. And I'm going to be very upfront with you as a Michigan fan. I much would have rather seen Florida State as opposed to Alabama, who is playing like the hottest team in the country. They took the 2-time defending national champion and made him look silly for large portions of that game. I don't know what else to say, Sean. Florida State, people acted like they had no good wins. It's kind of what we get into and why we really like college basketball, because a quad 1 win, the first game of the year in basketball is the same as on the 31st day of the year, 31st game of the year. So, I don't know why their win over LSU was so devalued. I get LSU was 9-3, but still a top 15 team. And, they beat another top 15 team by 10 points on Saturday. I understand it wasn't pretty, but the fact those wins were so devalued was pretty amazing. And it was equally as stunning. The Vegas odds right after the Michigan game were checked. I believe Florida State had a better shot to make the playoff. As we got into the early morning, it kept going up and up and up for Bama and down and down and down for Florida State. So as I hopped on a plane, I missed the reveal, but I kind of knew the way it was going to go. But regardless, there are so many other clips that could go into this. I just try to give my neutral opinion. Certainly do feel for those players, all those seniors who came back. But, you know, in the context of the Big Ten shot, now we have to preview Michigan versus Alabama, which I'm pretty sure the Rose Bowl will break ratings records and, another SEC versus Big Ten and a future SEC versus Big Ten in the other matchup. So perhaps this is a sign of things to come. Who knows?
Yeah, we can probably spend an entire half an hour, Joe, talking about this, but I just want to add one thing in. You have very much less control over your schedule in college football because there's only a couple of non-conference games, and you do not pick your conference games. That is from the conference. You get assigned those. They do schedule a good team in one of their 3 or 4 non-conference games, and they beat them. So, this is more of a diss on the ACC, I think, for having a down year. And the ACC didn't really go to bat for FSU in the committee room. FSU was messing around with possibly going to another conference before the season, and ultimately they get left out. And, the whole reason that they went to a 14 playoff was so that an undefeated team from a power conference would not be left out because, that did happen in the past when there was just the national championship game. There would be 3 undefeated teams sometimes, and they're probably wishing that they went back to 2 this time. But, a whole lot of arguments, and I think that we can go into it, again next week as we go more into previewing Bama and Michigan. But, they couldn't put Bama over Texas because Texas beat Bama, and they had to beat Bama, and they had to put Bama in because they beat Georgia. Head-to-head means a lot more in basketball or in football than basketball, just because there's such a smaller sample size. But here we are. Feel bad for Florida State, and I would have put them in, but at the same time, you understand why Bama and Georgia were in. All right, Big Ten bowl games, Joe. Real quick, we'll go into each one of these a little bit more, in a little bit more depth next time or in a future episode, but we just want to get these out there right now. Not more than maybe we don't know everything about every team, but as I load them up here, there are some good bowl games, obviously, with teams not in the college football playoff in the Big Ten. And as soon as this loads, we're going to get into it. All right, Northwestern gets Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl first. Like we said, good job to Northwestern on the season. Going to be a tall task. Utah's a pretty good ball club. Minnesota gets Bowling Green in the Quick Lane Bowl. That's at Ford Field in Michigan. 5-win.
I will not be in attendance.
5-win Minnesota too. I'm not sure there'll be many people there. There's probably going to be a lot of empty blue seats there at Ford Field. Rutgers plays Miami in the Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium. That should be a pretty good game. Both teams are kind of just okay. Ohio State and Missouri go to the Cotton Bowl at Jerry's World. Ohio State slight favorites there early on. That should be a good one on December 29th. Penn State and Ole Miss go to the Peach Bowl at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That, again, is going to be a really good bowl. Penn State's open as the slight favorites there. Maryland and Auburn in the Trans-Perfect Music City Bowl from Nashville. Wisconsin and LSU in the ReliaQuest Bowl. That is the former Outback Bowl at Tampa at the Buccaneers Stadium. I went to that a couple years ago when Penn State was in it with Arkansas. Iowa and Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. And then, of course, Alabama and Michigan in the Rose Bowl. So, Joe, and, we'll go into these more in a future episode, but anything really show out for you in these?
No, we'll get into this in our very next segment. Previewing them, like you said, is going to be impossible because the floodgates that are the transfer portal have just opened, and 24 hours in, Sean, into this week, I should say, boy, have they opened, and boy, is all freaking chaos let loose. So let's get into it.
Yeah, why don't you go into it, Joe? There's one big name. That's the quarterback from Ohio State, Kyle McCord, going in. I wouldn't say I'm like super surprised of this, but I am a little bit surprised because he certainly, wasn't elite by any stretch this year, but he definitely was better than people are giving him credit for. But Ohio State's going to have to find a new quarterback for next year.
Yeah, Sean, I was kind of amazed watching Ryan Day's press conference. Clearly not excited to be playing Missouri, but the most shocking part was he really didn't go to bat for Kyle McCord. Kind of implied there would be an open competition. Any starter who's got 11-1, who's completely healthy going into a bowl game, uh, I don't think it's very rare when they have to face open competition, right? So and people are going to scream about the Jalen Hurts Tua thing. Jalen Hurts wasn't competing for his job going into that 2017 college football playoff. So I, say what you want about Kyle McCord. He had the ninth highest QBR in the country. He got the ball to the playmakers. Was he CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, or even JT Barrett? Certainly not. But 11 wins and being efficient and not really turning the ball over too much in the big games. Obviously, the Michigan game, the last one, I'm not going to fault him too much for. It's really kind of amazing that Ohio State fans have reacted this way. There is a reasonable portion that understand that some of the problems were not on their team, were not just Kyle. Regardless, is their new QB Aaron Nolan, the guy they have in 2024, who's pretty much a 5-star on most recruiting websites? Is it going to be Lincoln Keyholes? Devin Brown, the rumors have been swirling about him transferring, perhaps to BYU or Utah. Or do they go after one of these Riley Leonards, Cam Wards, or Will Rogers in the portal? I'm pretty sure Rogers is going to go to Washington. Don't think Dante Moore is really in the mix for an Ohio State. Think he's looking more Oregon, Michigan, Miami. But there are so many pretty good quarterbacks in the portal, but a lot of them are on par, if not maybe a little better than McCord, but not a huge upgrade. Certainly Riley Leonard may qualify as one, but I think the biggest thing Ohio State's going to look for, Sean, is a dual threat QB. I think they've missed that since Justin Fields. They brought a dynamic element to their offense along with a really good run game. So a lot to ponder if you're an Ohio State fan, especially with Maya Williams going to the draft today. I think that caught a few people off guard. And Fleming entering the portal was probably the least shocking aspect of the day. But if you had said that 4 years ago, being the number one recruit in 2020, that he'd wouldn't even be the NFL at this stage and enter the portal, I think people would have drug tested you. So not going to be too doom and gloom for Ohio State. They are still the Ohio State Buckeyes, but certainly not a great day as it stands.
Yeah, that quarterback job might get a little bit less intriguing when Marvin Harrison Jr. is donning an NFL uniform next year instead of the Ohio State. But there's tons of other people in the transfer portal. Between NFL draft opt-outs and portals, these teams are just not the same. And if one team does look really bad or really good, I don't think you can really say like that they deserved a better spot based on the bowl game, because Georgia and FSU playing in the bowl, whatever bowl they're in, they don't care one bit about that bowl. Like if FSU wins or Georgia wins by 40, it's not gonna be like, oh, Georgia should have been in, FSU shouldn't have. Good on FSU for not being in. It's just they're not good enough to judge just because the factors are so much different. But last thing for football, Joe, IU's new coach Kirk Cignetti had quite the introductory press conference. He does hate Purdue and a couple other Big Ten schools, and he proclaimed that IU will be playing in the Big Ten championship next year. So these are obviously ridiculous claims, but he definitely got the crowd hyped, and he is going to be coaching James Madison in their bowl game, and he's starting to fill out his staff. But some pretty crazy headlines here from Coach Cignetti, but you got to aim high, right?
God, I loved it. He did go after my Wolverines and the Buckeyes, which I thought was hysterical. And here's how I look at it. I was talking to a few people in Indianapolis this weekend. He's 62. This is definitely his last rodeo. This is the highest level he's ever coached, at least as a head coach, right?
For sure.
Why not say
he does have SEC ties, though.
Yeah, but why not say F it and go for it? That's what I love about him. I really think that. I don't think you could fire up a crowd more than that. That's what I admire. You see the Harbaughs, the Myers, the even Jonathan Smith last week go out and be very diplomatic, not criticizing that by any stretch of the imagination. But maybe this is what Indiana needs, a dynamic guy. We named John Gruden, right? And if Cignetti wants to embrace that, be the fire up guy, and I understand Tom Allen was kind of that, but
At
Cignetti,
first.
yeah, but Cignetti, if he could be the unapologetic brash guy, not saying Indiana football is going to compete for national titles anytime soon, but I see this as a 4 or 5 year job for him. I think he's just gonna be a guy, especially in Indiana. That's the place to not really care about having to live up to ridiculous expectations. So good on him, Sean. And to do an impersonation, Purdue sucks. So does Michigan and Ohio State. So good for him, man.
Yeah, we'll see what their team looks like next year. Obviously, more names than I can count already in the portal, so he's got work to do. But in the age of the portal, you can rebuild a team kind of overnight. So, right at 16 minutes here, Joe, we're definitely going to go over today, but that's okay. Switching gears to basketball, a lot of action over the past couple days. We're going to start with Friday's action. First, my Indiana Hoosiers shut down Maryland. Assembly Hall was looking good, but my big takeaway out of this one is Maryland might be the worst team in the Big Ten. Their offense is really bad, and they did get overpowered by IU's size, which doesn't usually happen, at least didn't last year for Kevin Willard's Terps.
Don, that was probably the most surprising thing in this game. It's complete lack of physicality. In Indiana, I understand the way they play defensively, but Maryland to go into Assembly Hall with a pretty veteran team, I'd say, was kind of shocking. Especially they did have those road issues last year, very like 1-9 on the road, but to come in with this lackluster an effort is really not a good sign for the Terps. They do, I believe their next game is a home one. Just checking their schedule here real quick.
Penn State, I think.
Yeah. I on Wednesday, I would press the panic, panic, panic button if they lose that game. A lot of teams in the Big Ten sitting at 4-4. We'll go into one in a few minutes, but that is a game Maryland. That's the most important game of their season so far. If they lose that, they will lose the fan base, and Willard won't be on the hot seat by any stretch of the imagination. But December could be very uncomfortable for the Terrapins.
Yeah, Penn State did just lose a bye game to Bucknell on Saturday. We're not going to go into it more than that, but if Maryland doesn't right the ship, they could be looking at an Ohio State situation from last year. They're not a deep team. Donta Scott has regressed tremendously, and Julian Reese kind of got muscled up and beaten up by IU's bigs, which, Indiana will do that to a lot of teams this year, but, Maryland did only score 53 points after going on a pretty impressive run to end the game. But this game, I don't know if it got to 30, but if it didn't, it was up in the high 20s. So, Indiana looked good. I think that's a good formula for winning games in the Big Ten. They're going to be able to do that to a lot of teams. Made a couple threes early from your three big guys, of course, because that's how it goes. But that's a formula. Play good defense, pound it inside, get a lot of free throws, and there won't be a lot of teams that are going to blow you out that way. The other game on Friday, Joe, which was a far better watch for a neutral, was a carbon copy from last year's Northwestern and Purdue game. Crazy how similar it was. Mostly the same players. And one player stole the show. Boob Bowie hits a bunch of big shots down the stretch, and Northwestern takes down Purdue in overtime. I was pretty shocked that Northwestern was able to pull this one out with all the foul trouble they dealt with.
Yeah, Sean, I thought the biggest key to this game was they had an 8-point deficit at a half, and usually when that happens, Purdue just takes over, and whenever you get close, Purdue just keeps scoring and scoring with Edey, and it just gets too frustrating, and eventually, I don't say teams quit, but they run out of gas, for lack of a better term. Look at the score line in this game. Zach Edey, 35 points. Boo Buie, 31 points. Ryan Langborg, 20 points is impressive in and of itself, but 4 of 5 from 3. Ty Berry, 3 of 5 from 3. Not shocking from him, but the combination of all that tells me Northwestern's a very dangerous team when they're hot. I think they were a really good team last year. They were inconsistent, so I'm interested to see if the Cats could be a lot more consistent this year. They were the 2 seed last year, right, Sean, in the tournament,
I think
Big
so.
Ten?
Yeah, in that
Yeah,
7-way tie for second. Yeah.
yeah. But maybe in a way that's, better than a 12-8 Big Ten record. So really good for them. Huge win for Chris Collins. I think if he could get them into the tournament again this year, which is looking pretty good, but only 7 games in, but still, uh, you know, he may have been from being on the hot seat after the COVID year and after 21-22 to probably being the a top 5 coach in this conference as it stands. So really good for them. Uh, I don't think you hit the panic button at all if you're Purdue. It does not negate any of the big top 5 wins you've had less than 2 weeks ago. And Northwestern, my message to you is just don't put your foot off the gas. You played Detroit, Mercy, Chicago State, game at DePaul in 2 weeks. Those are all quad 4 games. Don't I'll put it this way. If you lose any of those 3 games, that will cancel out this great win you had. The best win in college basketball to this date. So my message to Northwestern is do not screw up. And message to Purdue is, I don't know, maybe defend the 3 a little better, but at a certain point, Boo Booey's making ridiculous shots and Ty Berry's money and Lang Borg is money. So, you might just chalk it up at that's college basketball.
Yeah, in this game, Joe, Purdue had 52 rebounds and Northwestern had 27. I mean, you don't win games getting out rebounded like that. I think Purdue, you chalk it up to, all right, they hit 50% of their threes and we hit 26% of ours. That's why you lost. Purdue is 31 of 41 from the foul line. That's 76%. That's fine. You did have 17 turnovers to Northwestern's 3, and that's ultimately why you lost the game. The formula is the same to beat Purdue last year. They'll win the conference at 16-4 or 15-5, and the games that they lose will be because their guards can't handle the pressure, and the other team makes a couple shots. But Purdue has already kind of figured that out because they're playing right now. I don't know if it's over yet, but we'll get to that later. Saturday, Joe will turn the page. Bucknell beat Penn State, as I said earlier. And then at noon, Wisconsin picks up a huge win for the Big Ten at the Kohl Center over Marquette. Max Klesmit had 21 points. I'm pretty sure those were all in the first half. And Wisconsin scored it enough and defended well enough to pick up a top 5 win. Impressive here from the Badgers.
Yeah, Sean, that crowd was absolutely electric, especially for an 11:30 a.m. local tip, which, I guess 11:30 noon might not seem like a huge difference, but to anyone in college, that 30 minutes is a big difference, especially if the kids go out drinking Friday night. Wisconsin really balanced. I think this game was over at the end of the first half. 13-point deficit for Marquette. The way Wisconsin plays, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to get that lead back, especially
they did go on like
on the road.
They did bring it back to 3 or 4 right after halftime, and then Wisconsin immediately got their 15-point lead back. So
my thing is, Sean, with that though, is Wisconsin, once they have a lead, they just will not a lead of double digits. They rarely lose it, and it's equally frustrating for any team and all Big Ten fans know what I'm talking about. You've been at the Kohl Center, they start hot, you get like 3 or 4 points away, then usually it's some annoying charge taking Badger, Brad Davis normally one of the more unlikable ones according to other fans. I know Wisconsin's loves their basketball team. Hits a huge shot. So really good win for Wisconsin. They really struggled at the beginning of the year, but Sean, I think the Big Ten is looking a lot better, even since our last episode. Northwestern beating Purdue. I understand that's conference on conference friendly fire. Northwestern could easily be a ranked team, and Wisconsin could well be on their way there. They have a huge game at Michigan State tomorrow night, which we'll get into a little later. But not much else to say. Really good balanced scoring: 16, 10, 13, 21, and 9 for the starters. And with only 3 minutes from Connor Essegian, still think that's weird. And John Blackwell, the Detroit kid, continuing to contribute off the bench, 6 points. That's what they lacked a lot last year, and the fact he continues to flip the narrative, the narrative that they don't have a bench is really good for the Badgers. And perhaps our take that they could compete in this conference and be a dark horse is not so bad.
Yeah, they did. His 6 points, Joe, were the only bench points of the Badgers, and that will cost them sometimes, but not today because everyone else in the starting lineup played pretty well. And Chucky Hepburn 9, 6, and 4 as the point guard. That's pretty good numbers from him. But Marquette has taken they lost to Purdue, Wisconsin, both their losses. I still think they're an elite team, and that loss is going to age, or that win for Wisconsin is going to age really well. Next game, Joe, unfortunately for you, Oregon knocks off Michigan 86-83 on a last-second heave from inside a half court. Jackson Shellstad. This was a brutal loss for Michigan. Doug McDaniel was awesome, 33 points. And Oregon, without their two best players, their two big guys that we talked about, they end up getting a win at home. Shoot 51% from the field, 62% from downtown. It's a tough one for the Wolverines.
I'm covering my face and I'm so embarrassed because I really thought Michigan would get all these experienced guys in the portal and learn. This was, if you were a Michigan fan, I think if anyone watched Michigan basketball last year, you kind of knew this was going to happen. I did not feel good. I was actually in the rec room right before the Big Ten title game. Every Michigan fan in there knew what was going to happen. We had a 1 point lead. Cabo misses a free throw. They absolutely messed up their next possession, Oregon. Michigan gets another chance at life. They make the first one. The moment the ball rimmed out, I knew what was going to happen. We give them a foul. I at least thought we were going to have a chance at the end of regulation to have a shot. Can't even get a shot off. That happened in like 5 games last year when we had a game-winning chance. We couldn't even hit the rim. Doug McDaniel couldn't even get it across half court. He turned it over. And Oregon still missed. And I'm like, I'm just expecting to get blown out in overtime. We keep fighting back, get it to 83-83. The moment that ball went up, I turned to my buddy and knew it was going in. And I'm not even going to put any advanced analytics or strategy into it. Michigan is allergic to winning close games. Everything about last year's team will tell you that. This year's team losing to Memphis, they can't keep a lead and they can't come back from a small deficit in the last 2 minutes. It's really a shame. And it's the biggest part of it is Wisconsin's win over Marquette's going to age so well, Sean. This win would have aged really well with Oregon getting their best players back, and especially because Dana Altman teams do get better throughout the year. And at worst, Oregon's probably going to be a tournament team, if not a borderline tournament team. So this probably would have been a quad one win. Regardless, yet another missed opportunity for Michigan. Similar to Atlantis, this is probably the third missed opportunity of the year. So it's really a shame, Sean. And I kept that about as PG-13 as I could because I could really say a lot more.
Yeah, this is an okay at best Oregon team without their best players. And they do have a good coach, probably have the coaching advantage, but it's just a real good opportunity for a true road win, and you get a legacy game from your point guard who hits 7 threes and has 33 points. It's
and it's all for nothing. All for nothing.
That does hurt because they should have won the game.
Absolutely.
And, you have a 10 of 16 shooting day from Oregon from 3. It doesn't matter how open you are. That is a good percentage.
Absolutely.
But you're just going to have to move on. Like you said, Joe, you're in that stretch where you got to get one. Going to be desperate measures for Michigan on Tuesday, which is great news for my Indiana Hoosiers because we never win those kind of games. Last game on Saturday, Rutgers and Illinois at the rack. Fighting Illini take care of business here. No Scarlet Knight in double figures. Illinois pulls away in the second half. Is this a good Illinois performance or a Rutgers team that's not that good?
I think Terrence Shannon, y'all highlight the 23 points, 10 rebounds, but Rutgers is not that good. It's impossible to hide from the narrative. I thought, maybe they got some good momentum after the opening loss to Princeton, but then you look at who they beat and you realize, not really. St. Peter's, Howard, Georgetown, and Georgetown's still rebuilding. So Rutgers hasn't really had a good performance yet this season, and it's only continued. I think they will be. We had a debate at the beginning of the year, Sean, about like pretty much 7 to 12 in this conference was wide open. It could be anyone in that range. I'm leading that Rutgers is going to be around 11-12. I think they will still pick off a few wins at the rack over teams they shouldn't beat, but if you're going to have this kind of performance in a game you probably had to win, it's not does not bode well for the Scarlet Knights.
They were talking about rebounding again here, 55-27 in favor of Illinois. Rutgers teams, that does not happen to them. Even the Rutgers teams that just play tough and aren't even that good. So, definitely ringing the panic alarm for Rutgers at this point, because you've shown nothing to prove that you're going to win more than 5 or 6 games in this conference. But turning the page to the future, Joe, or I guess the past now, we'll talk about Purdue getting right against Iowa. We're just at 30 minutes, so a little preview of the Tuesday, Wednesday games after this. Iowa and Purdue. Purdue looks real good, 87-68 final. This game was over in the first half. Zach Edey, 25-12. Lance Jones with 17. Get some other people in double figures. And Mackey Arena crowd after a loss. There's probably no tougher place to go, and Purdue immediately got right with a big win over Iowa.
Yeah, Sean, I think Iowa's actually entering a similar stretch to Michigan here. 5-3, losing to Purdue again. No one didn't expect that. They go to Ames, Iowa on Thursday, and then they host the Wolverines on Sunday. They got to pick off one, if not both of those games. Iowa, it's one of these things where if you don't play defense, you leave yourself open to the mercy of your opponents. And kind of like Michigan, 10-16 performances from three aren't repeatable, but they happen. And if Iowa has an insane day of offense, which they normally do, and it happens against a really bad team, let's say Minnesota, opportunities to pick up these wins are going to be far and few between, because you have to assume Iowa's going to lose a game they shouldn't. So I really don't know about the Hawkeye shot. I think I will know 100% the kind of team they will be after Sunday.
Yeah, they look bad today. I mean, defensively, they always look bad. When you play Purdue, you have to pick to either sell out on Edey and make the guards shoot threes, or the opposite. Let Edey get 30 and 15 and don't let anybody else score. They didn't do either. And that's not, you got to pick one. If they beat you one way and you try to shut down Edey and he only gets 19 and, Purdue makes 7 or 8 threes, then okay, at least you tried. But they did neither. And McCaffrey got a technical, and he was right. But that technical, they were hanging around. I think it was 7 or 8 at that point, and then that technical, it was 17 before you blinked. Usually coaches time their technicals pretty well. That was kind of the game there for McCaffrey in Iowa.
Brand might need some anger management classes. If I'm the judge, I continue to recommend them.
McCaffrey is, Joe, the only person in the history of college basketball unofficially to get 2 technicals in the same game and not get ejected. That was against Indiana a couple years ago. Still never got an explanation for that. But they didn't make shots today. Peyton Sandford didn't score until I stopped watching, which is probably about 3/4 of the way through the game. So let's see. Did he score? All right, he had 9 points. So he hit 3 threes in garbage time. But if he's going to be their guy, he can't do that because they don't play defense. And they do have a deep team. They have a lot of freshmen in their rotation, and maybe they can figure something out that way. But it's the same sort of Iowa team without an NBA player. And that I have to lean towards not being good enough for the NCAA tournament at this point. We'll do a conference reset, ideally before Christmas, and when there's all those bye games after some of the good non-conference games are over. I was thinking about doing that after Christmas, but there's a big event for Michigan football going on around then, so we might do that at around the 20th. But we were low on Iowa, and I don't think we're going to be much higher on them than we were at the beginning of the year. But Joe, 35 minutes, previews tomorrow, big day for the sport. We got a bunch of conference games. Let's go Michigan State and Wisconsin first. Michigan State is out of the top 25. Wisconsin's into it. Big game.
Sean, I think this is the game A.J. Hoggard needs to come alive. Michigan State's had a week off now. That's been the headlines all over the state of Michigan. Is A.J. Hoggard going to come back to the form he was in at the end of last year? I don't think Michigan State can afford to lose this game. They have not had a really good win so far. I don't think the Butler win was anything that was anything other than a guarantee, pretty much. my point is, Wisconsin's a top 25 team now. They just beat Marquette. They're at the high of highs. Michigan State's got to knock them down because if they lose to Wisconsin, it does not bode well. And, I really wouldn't want to be a Michigan State fan having to win at Nebraska to be over 500. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's Michigan State slight favorites. They need that game because they don't have a win against a tournament team yet. And Wisconsin probably doesn't need it.
No.
They just won Marquette, and Michigan State needs it more. Other Big Ten game tomorrow. IU goes to Michigan at 9 o'clock on Peacock. Michigan 4-4. IU coming off of a nice win against Maryland, and they looked pretty good against Harvard the day before. Indiana definitely moving in the right direction. Joe, this is going to be a guards battle for when Michigan has the ball and Indiana's on defense, and it's going to be a forwards battle when it's the opposite thing. So, anything to add in this one?
If I'm Indiana, my number one game plan on defense is to make Terrace Reed uncomfortable. He has been and he's played well at certain points this year. But if with Indiana's defensive prowess, if they could pressure him, if they could get two guys on him and make him travel, make him throw the ball everywhere, that's when teams have had great defensive success against Michigan. And if they could install a press, kind of what Oregon did in the first half, Michigan hasn't showed the capability to adjust to it fully. Doug can dribble past some people, but that was mainly the St. John's game where St. John's didn't learn the Patino press yet. So if I'm IU defensively, that's how I stop Michigan. Because if Michigan gets rolling offensively, I don't think Indiana has the firepower yet to keep up with them, especially on the road. I think if Indiana wins this game, it's going to have to be making Michigan do what they've done all year in the bad losses, which is turn the ball over and really get Terrace Reed in foul trouble because Will Cheddar, he's a foul machine at times. And Indiana, if you're going to win this game, you have to exploit your advantage in the paint. So if I'm Indiana, I'm making Michigan turn the ball over, exploiting my advantage in the paint. And for the love of God, Michigan hasn't made a lot of threes this year, but if I'm Indiana, the last thing I want to do is give them wide open threes. Why give a team that's been struggling a chance at life? And how Michigan's a 6.5-point favorite is baffling to me. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, a couple things to add. Indiana's ball pressure has been so much better the last couple games, and they've played. Mack from Harvard is the best freshman in the country. He averages like 24 points a game. And Jameer Young, who gets past, he's probably the second fastest player in the conference behind Doug McDaniels. So they've done better at that, and they've done better guarding the three. It seems like that's how Michigan's going to win the game. And like you said, Indiana fourth in free throw rate this year in the entire country. So they're going to take high percentage looks, and they're going to get to the foul line. And Michigan does have probably enough bodies to handle a little foul trouble between their forwards, but Indiana's going to win by shoving it down their throats, and Michigan is going to win by getting Indiana in rotations and getting... I think we might see a lot of zone defense in this game from both teams. It would be very smart for Michigan to do that. I don't know if you've done that much this year and don't remember it. But Indiana has, and I think, like you said, Joe, you could see some zone presses from IU, especially with Xavier Johnson most likely out. He's one of the best on-ball defenders in the conference. So this could go either way. I think the crowd will be good, kind of out of desperation. If Indiana can handle that initial, surge, I think, it really is about a 50-50 as it can get. We've got Illinois going to the Jimmy V tomorrow, Florida Atlantic. FAU's 3.5-point favorites. And the Owls have looked great since they lost to Bryant. I would definitely say that this would be that Illinois are the underdogs, and that if they do pull this off, it's a really good win.
Absolutely, Sean. I think it would cap off probably from Friday to our next episode on Wednesday. As good a 4-day stretch as the conference has had in a while. It's hard to imagine. Outside of multiple teams, Purdue winning those games was, of course, amazing. Illinois, it's been interesting because last year their problem was consistency. Rutgers does struggle, but winning at the rack is nothing to scoff at all. Any win there is huge. So I think if they can put together two really good performances, even if they lose this game by a little, I think that's a good side for Illinois. So definitely not a must-win game, but maybe a game where it'd be nice to see if I'm an Illini fan, two consistent performances together, and maybe someone else besides Terrence Shannon could be the leading scorer.
Hey, we've got a couple other games: OSU, Miami, Ohio, Rutgers at Wake Forest, Nebraska at Minnesota. Not much to talk about from those games, Joe. Last game we've got here: Iowa at Iowa State on Thursday. Iowa's in a tough stretch. Iowa State is a really good defensive team. It is going to be contrasting styles there in Ames. Good opportunity for a road non-conference win, though, for the Hawks.
Yeah, Sean. I think Iowa might be playing this game pretty desperate, and I don't know what a desperate Iowa team in this year's context looks like. So I'm not going to make a prediction on this game or even preview it. I think it's mainly I don't know Iowa State as well too. Uh, this is a game where I'll put it this way: Iowa's either going to get blown out by 20, or they will make every shot and win by 15. So
Yeah,
one of
it's
those Iowa kind of games.
Iowa State, for those who don't know, is a good Rutgers. They defend really well, and they have some people who can make some shots. And when they do, they're a top 25 teams. So Iowa, when they got desperate tonight at Mackey against Purdue, they put in this press, and Purdue was running laps around that and getting dunks. So desperate Iowa, to me, is even worse than regular Iowa, which is bad to begin with. So I don't see that game going well for the Hawks, but you do never know. You can really turn the tide on your season if you do pull that one off. So, Joe, that's all we have for them today. Next time, I'm not sure, but we'll definitely get more into those bowl games, more into the college football playoff, any more news that comes from football, whether it's a transfer portal or something like that. And then we'll go over the action we just previewed. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.